Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to Lesson 60 of Chef's Apprentice, Learning to Cook Like a Pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is rich and poor man's lobster. The monkfish is sometimes called the poor man's lobster. Although quite ugly, the monkfish is a tasty fish. This preparation combines both regular, rich man's, and poor man's lobster. The lobster meat actually becomes part of the sauce, which is the base for the monkfish. Here you will flavor the mirepoix with a touch of double concentrate tomato paste, which will deepen the flavor and the color of the finished sauce. You will also learn to flame a high alcohol ingredient, in this case, cognac. I highly recommend that you read flaming in the glossary on my website, chefsapprentice.com, and be very careful. When ready to flame, measure out the cognac in a separate container. Close the cognac bottle, move it to a safe distance. Then pour the cognac into the pan. Igniting the alcohol can be done with a match or a lighter, or by carefully tilting the pan until the flame on the stove ignites the liquid at the very edge of the pan. The alcohol usually ignites in a big flash, so be careful and stand back. After lighting, do not stir the liquid or the flame will extinguish before the alcohol burns off. The alcohol will burn off fairly quickly. If you're scared of this technique, don't do it. Instead, simply allow the liquid to simmer and the alcohol will evaporate. In this preparation, you will also learn to poach fish in olive oil. This is a gentle cooking method that preserves the moistness of the fish and makes it very buttery. Techniques today are portioning fish, chopping, sweating mirepoix, deglazing, flaming, and reducing, pureeing, seasoning and keeping warm, poaching fish in olive oil, plating, and garnishing. So let's start cooking. Okay, let's talk about the mise en place for lesson 60, which is rich and poor man's lobster. Now here we have the poor man's lobster. This is monkfish. Now monkfish are ugly fish. The meat itself is also kind of ugly, but it looks good once it's cooked. The description calls for a pound of fish cut into 8 2-ounce portions, so that would be for 8 people. I'm making 4 tonight, so I have 4 2-ounce portions, plus I have a little bit left over at the end that I'll cook along with the rest. Even though I'm only making for 4, I'm giving you the amounts here for making the entire recipe according to the description. So we have here 8 ounces of lobster meat. It's still frozen together, but it'll be thawed a little bit later on, and we're going to chop that up, coarsely chop it. Okay. We'll need about 2 tablespoons of finely chopped shallots, about 1 tablespoon of finely chopped celery. We'll need about a half a teaspoon of double concentrate tomato paste. Now there are a lot of brands out there, and this one is store brand. You can get one of the brand names. I'm just going to eyeball that when we get to it, but we'll need about a half a teaspoon of the double concentrate tomato paste. And we'll need to have about 2 teaspoons of finely chopped garlic, some olive oil, and then we'll need cognac, or I'm just using an inexpensive brandy, and we'll need about 1/4 of a cup of that. Now I normally eyeball this, but because we're going to flame it tonight, I'm doing it in a different way. I've got about 1/4 of a cup here. I didn't actually measure how much is in here, but it's about 1/4 of a cup. If you have a little bit more, that's fine. And I'm keeping it covered so that so it doesn't evaporate, because it's a high alcohol. It's got a lot of alcohol in it. And I'm also keeping this separate from the bottle. The bottle is going to be put away, so it's not going to be anywhere near the flame. We're just going to have this for when we need it. And then we'll need kosher salt and a pepper mill. We'll need about a half of a teaspoon of sugar, the juice of 1 lemon. We'll need some red peppercorns. Now you can either buy red peppercorns and crack them yourself, or you can buy one of these little. This is a Frontier brand. It's a grinder with the pink peppercorns inside. That's the way it comes. Okay, so if you buy it, you have them already in a grinder. And then we'll need some red sea salt. This is Hawaiian red sea salt. It's actually red in color. Okay. And that's all the ingredients that we need. We'll break, come back, and I'll show you the equipment for lesson 60. Okay, for equipment, we're going to need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We'll need to have a slicing knife to portion the fish, a juicer to juice that lemon. We'll need to have a saute pan, which we already have here on the stove, a wooden spoon, Also need to have a food processor and then a rubber spatula to get the sauce out of the food processor. Need to have a mixing bowl, a fairly small one. It's just going to hold the sauce. And then we'll need to have a pan to poach the fish in. Now, you want the pan to be not much bigger than when all the fish is in it. Okay, we want the fish to fit in there, not real snugly, but to fit in there so there's not a lot of extra space around them. Why? Because we're going to be putting olive oil in there to do the poaching, and we don't want to have to use too much olive oil, all right? So the more extra space that we have around the fish, the more olive oil we're going to need, all right? So I picked a small pan. Now I'm only doing 4 portions. If you're doing 8, you might need a slightly larger pan, but you want to pick one in which the fish can kind of just fit with a little bit of extra space, but not much. Then we're going to have to get that fish out of the pan after it's poached. At that point, it's going to be kind of soft. I have my fish spatula here. We may need it. It may not be the best thing to get the fish out of that pan. We also have some little rubber tip tongs here. They may be helpful, but I have a feeling that the best way to get it out of there is just going to be with a large soup spoon. All right, and then we'll need to have another spoon for plating and some plates, which we'll pick later. So let's break, come back, and start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to sweat the mirepoix. So we'll put the shallots. I've already heated up this oil. It's about 2 tablespoons of oil, like we always do when we are sweating mirepoix. And I'll add the celery, a little bit of seasoning, stir it around a little bit, get it coated. Okay, our shallots and celery are looking good. We're going to add the garlic. Sweat that for about 30 seconds. Okay, now we want to put in about, half a teaspoon of the double concentrate tomato paste. Stir it around. You got to stir it or it will burn. Okay, now we're going to add the cognac and flame it. So first I'm pouring it in from a separate container. Then, turn up the flame, get a nice flame there. And we're gonna I turned up the flame to light it. I've turned the flame back down to let it reduce. So we're gonna burn off the alcohol here. And then we're gonna let it reduce until it is just wet. All right, now we're going to add the chopped lobster meat. And I want to add just enough water. I don't want to cover it, okay? I want to have the water to be like halfway up the lobster meat, okay? We're going to be pureeing this, right? And we want to get a sauce. We don't want it to be soupy. We can always add more liquid later if it's too thick, but it's hard to take water away. So we don't have the lobster is not completely covered. We're also going to be adding the lemon juice to this, so that's going to add a little bit more liquid. So what I want to do is I just want to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to puree it. All right, now we're going to add the lobster mixture to the food processor. Now you might wonder why I'm pureeing this beautiful lobster. Well, personally, I think that lobster makes a better garnish or a sauce or an accompaniment, and I don't think it's that great as a main course, unless you do something to it. Just lobster alone, I think, is kind of dull, actually. All right, so now we're going to puree this lobster mixture. Okay, let's see how it looks. Good, it's nice. It's got a nice consistency to it. Not too thick, not too thin. Now we are going to be adding the lemon juice to it, so that will thin it a bit. Okay, let's take the lobster puree out of the food processor bowl. I like to get it all. That's why we use a rubber spatula. Now we're going to add the lemon juice. That was the juice of 1 lemon, remember, and about half a teaspoon of sugar. And then we're going to mix that up. All right, now we want to taste it and adjust the seasoning. I'm going to add a little bit more salt. Remember, this is to taste. I like to just taste the salt, just so it's just starting to come through, and then mix that up. All right, now let's taste it again. Perfect. Okay, now we're going to keep this warm until we're ready to plate up. All right, now we want to season the monkfish. And I like to pick up the extra seasoning from whatever I do the seasoning in. I almost always do it in a sizzle plate. Okay, next we're going to fit the fish pieces into the bottom of this saucepan. And you can see they fit with a little space around them, not a lot. All right, now I'm going to put some olive oil into this saucepan so it comes about 3/4 of the way up the fish. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a little secret. You can use fresh olive oil. I happen to be using olive oil that I used to poach some chicken thighs a couple of days ago, so it's got that flavor in it, right? It's insapriri, that Italian term that I pronounce so badly. It means to layer flavors. So we have the fish, it's about halfway up. The oil's about halfway up. Okay, that's good. Okay, now we're going to put this fish on the stove on medium to low heat. And we're going to let this poach. So this fish, when you have some kind of a protein in a liquid, in this case it's an oil, it's poaching. Okay, so we're going to poach it for about 15 to 20 minutes. That should be enough time for the fish to become kind of flaky and for you to start to see the segments of the fish. So we're about, I think, 5 minutes into the poaching, and 4 minutes actually. And my oil was starting to boil a little bit, so I've turned it down. I just want the oil to kind of simmer a little bit. You got just a very gentle bubbling there, and about halfway through, we're going to turn these over. Okay, we're about halfway through our time. I want to turn these over, and I can see a couple of them are kind of stuck to the bottom. We're just going to have to gently release them. And yeah, there we go. Then I want to turn them over. Now we'll let them poach for 10 more minutes on this side. Okay, it's been 20 minutes, and if you look at these pieces, you can start to see the segments on the side, and that's what we want to see. And also, we want them to be a little flaky. Now, I can test the piece that I am not serving. That was, it was like kind of like the end piece, and yeah, that looks nice. Nice and it's not coming apart here though. It's not as flaky as I'd like it to be. It's just, there we go. That's perfect. Okay, I'm gonna take these off the heat and plate. Okay, it's time to plate up. We're gonna take the sauce that we've been keeping warm. You might have to stir that up a little bit. Some of the liquids might start to separate out of it. Okay, then we want to pool that in your plate. Now remember, if you're serving 8, you have to divide this 8 ways. Okay. Then we want to place one of the pieces of monkfish into the middle of that pool. Then we want to give a twist of the red peppercorns. You might want to get a little bit. I have a white plate, so I'm getting a little bit on the plate too. Looks nice. And then a few grains of the red sea salt. And then I kept out some of the points of the lobster claw to garnish. And there we have it. That is the conclusion of Rich and Poor Man's Lobster. You can see photos of the final dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is roasted stuffed mini peppers with ginger mushroom ragu. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.